filming cryptocurrency in action in New Hampshire, and they were just blown away compared to everywhere else they go. New York City, Boston, San Francisco, all these places. They meet with some kind of a blockchain company kind of person,
Right.
and it's a completely different thing up here because you have people trying to actually use it and not just
Mm.
let's just launch a company and see where that goes, but actually like, regular people are using it for its regular purposes.
Yeah. It's awesome. I think well yeah, I mean that's key. And that's I'm a use it in its use case kind of guy myself. So do you trade at all, or would you consider yourself a crypto trader, or are you just uh buy and use, or I mean, do you even buy it at this point if you've been involved in a place where it's exchanged like that?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been what one could call a user. I never used an exchange. And when I moved to New
Okay.
Hampshire, I don't even remember if I ever bought any. I think I just received some in exchange for services or goods
Cool.
sometimes. And just that's kind of been the way I've been going all along.
Cool. That's very cool. So, I guess in 30 seconds, like what's the super overview version of Dash? What is Dash?
So Dash is the name is a portmanteau of digital cash, and it's
Mhm.
meant to fulfill Satoshi's white paper, the original vision of a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, and doing a couple things to improve it. For example, keeping fees exceptionally low, having instant transactions, and having optional privacy functions. And in
Okay.
addition to that, Dash is also the world's first, and as far as I know, only currently functioning or major decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very cool. We'll get to that a little later. That's one of the things I hope to talk to you quite a bit about. Um, so Dash is a fork of Litecoin, from my
Originally,
my
yes, it's now a fork of
originally.
Bitcoin.
Oh, really? Okay. I was curious, why was Litecoin chosen initially, and I was going to ask why not Bitcoin. So maybe you can key
Yeah, if
us
you
in on
want me to
a bit of the.
get into the early days, so Evan Duffield, the founder of Dash, he originally identified he got into Bitcoin and identified a problem with it, that transactions are completely transparent. And at some point, people will
Mhm.
start to put the pieces together and be able to trace financial histories.
Yeah.
And so he said he came to the Bitcoin core team saying, "Hey, this is you guys got a great thing going here. I know how to make it better. Let me help." And they
Mhm.
basically told him to shove off. So he said, "Well, I'll do it. I'll do my own thing then." And so I I'm guessing the reason that Litecoin was originally chosen as a code base was it, I have to speculate because I wasn't there at the time. That was a long time ago.
Sure.
And I think it was either because Litecoin's block interval, 2.5 minutes, as opposed to Bitcoin every 10 minutes, was more in line
Right.
with what he wanted to do for something more effective as cash,
Mhm.
or it could have been because of the mining algorithms. Bitcoin, has the
Okay.
SHA-256, the usual mining algorithm, and
Right.
Dash has something called X11, which it
Mhm.
pioneered, which has 11 different hashing algorithms. A few different coins use it now. And so it
Yeah.
might have been a way of trying to create a more initially ASIC resistant coin. But either way,
Okay.
it was forked from Litecoin. There was a bug in the Litecoin code base, which
Mhm.
caused the mining to come out at an exceptional rate. And then at the same time, the founder Evan was involved in a full-time job. So he was being yelled at by his boss who was trying to put out fires with the coding. And so the small communities amassed at that point were like, well, okay, look, we got, what is it? 10% of the coin's eventual coin supply is in existence on pretty much the first day. What are we going to do about it?
Right.
So, what they said, Evan polled the community saying, well, do you want to start over? And they're like, no. Do you want to like try to airdrop or redistribute it to some people? It's like, no. Well, I guess we'll just keep going. And
Sure.
there's a few people mining at the time. And interestingly enough, it almost helped. If you look right now at the coin distribution charts, Dash
Mhm.
is about as well distributed as Bitcoin, despite being,
Okay.
I don't know, a third as old, and it's much better distributed than Litecoin, despite Litecoin being a good 3 years older.
Right.
And part of that is probably because of this initial distribution. What happened
Mm.
was a lot of people got a bunch of coins right away and just sold them right away.
Sure.
And at least two of the exchanges from what I remember reading that had a lot of original, as it was called back then, dark coin on them,
Mhm.
then got hacked and a bunch was stolen and then dumped on other exchanges. So it was a little bit of
Okay.
a messy beginning, but it probably turned out to
Sure.
be for the best in the long run.
Sure. Very cool. So let's see. On the algorithm, like you mentioned, the X11, uh, a lot of coins use different ways to create speed. Dash has the instant send feature. Why
Hmm.
is that necessary with a fast block time? Like, what's the thought process there?
Yeah. So the thought process behind all cryptocurrencies, I would assume, is to be better than current financial systems.
Hmm.
And right now, what you have with, let's just take, I would just say Bitcoin Cash because that's closer to the Bitcoin that was around when Dash was founded, as originally as Xcoin for like a week, and they figured out a stupid name called a dark
Sure.
coin, which is better. But so what happened was, what happens is when you broadcast a transaction, it can get received as unconfirmed, and usually for a lot of people, that's just, oh, that's good enough. We want to go away. And same
Right.
thing as you swipe a credit card transaction, it goes through right away. But
Hmm.
does it really? It takes like a couple days to maybe confirm. They can be
Right.
chargebacks, there can be fraud, all kinds of stuff. And that's
Right.
kind of the stuff that cryptocurrency is designed to improve upon. And
Hmm.
so with something like, let's just take Litecoin because it's 10 minutes, is a little bit of a long time for Bitcoin. But say with Litecoin,
Sure.
broadcast a transaction, it could be confirmed in 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes is an eternity. If you've ever worked as like a barista or something like that, which I haven't, but I have empathy for them nonetheless. You see like a long line in the morning. Hey, I want to pay with this thing. And then you just kind of hang around in the back and just wait for a
All
confirmation.
right.
And it can be an eternity. And
Yeah.
otherwise, you can risk some sort of a double spend. And um,
Hmm.
I used to use Bitcoin for my day to day transactions all the time. And when it started to get slower, I actually felt that experience firsthand because I'd be decide where I want to go for lunch. I'd be like, oh, Panera, that sounds good. I'm going to buy a gift card from Gift. And so I'd do it. And then I'd be like waiting out in the parking lot 20, 30 minutes later for a confirmation.
Right.
Like sometimes I had to
Right.
skip lunch just because of that. It's been a couple
Sure.
embarrassing times. I bought a coffee, but didn't have enough on my Bitcoin debit card for lunch.
Sure.
So I bought the coffee and waited for confirmation to transfer for a whole 6 hours while I was doing work at the coffee shop. It just never came through and I just took off. So
Right.
obviously those are
Yeah.
extreme cases from extreme times in Bitcoin's history. But the
Right.
reality is you need something that's through right away. And if you're
Hmm.
using something that can be double spent, a zero confirmation transaction, or as
Hmm.
happened with Bitcoin later on, sometimes it got so congested that those transactions just never went through and got rejected and you had
Right.
to start again. So basically, you need something that's through right away to be something that's perfect. And so
Right.
Dash has something called instant send, which locks a transaction in 1.3 seconds. So it's completely confirmed by then. And that allows it
Hmm.
to be. And it's kind of weird because so few other coins have tried to copy this design. There's been a few,
Hmm.
like I believe Pivx still has that, maybe Smart
Yeah.
Cash, although I might be wrong, but it does work pretty well.
Cool. So then is it later written to the blockchain? Like it's sitting, I'm guessing, in a master node, and then at a later point it gets written to the chain, or does the instant send write it immediately to the or in 1.3 seconds right to the chain?
Yeah, so it's considered a transaction lock. So in
Mhm.
case the viewers at home don't know exactly how Dash works, it has a second layer of nodes called Masternodes that
Mm.
perform a bunch of special functions. And so when you do an instant send transaction, it gets broadcast as a normal transaction, and the masternodes, a quorum of masternodes, which is a semi-randomly selected group of them, like a random selection, you might have like 1, 2, 3, 4 by chance, but
Mm.
quorum is like a spaced randomization, so you can't have a few next to each other.
Okay.
Anyway, a little bit in the woods, but anyway, you lock the transaction for up to five blockchain confirmations. So when it goes through,
Okay.
at least 5 blocks later, so it gets locked and the inputs cannot be changed or reversed during that time. So
Okay.
it effectively,
Cool.
I don't know exactly where that works in terms of limits, but as far as I know, you could basically instant send every transaction on the network and have like a
Mm.
massive, even if you start running into a massive transaction load on the network, you can still have them all go through instantly, which is
Mm.
pretty useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So you mentioned Evan Duffield. Are there other who are the main developers at Dash? How many developers are actively working on the program?
I believe the last count for full-time developers was about 60.
Okay.
So
That's a big team.
it's a major project. That's one thing I like to point out, some because some people, or probably most of us, and I'm guilty of this sometimes too, go to something like CoinMarketCap and just kind of go right top down,
Right.
and that's kind of where we rate projects. But I remember some point midpoint last year,
Hmm.
post, because I troll Reddit all the time, just looking through it all the time, and I saw some post in the Litecoin subreddit about how happy they were when they got Litecoin's first full-time developer. And then at that point, Dash had at least 40 full-time developers at the time, and it's about 60 right now. So
Interesting.
Evan Duffield was the founder. Evan Duffield and Internet Ape, as he was known,
Sure.
founded it. Although Internet Ape didn't last very long at all. And Evan is now no longer with the Dash core team. He
Okay.
left to do his own project called Dash Labs, which is a
Okay.
future thinking project designing stuff like open source hardware and doing research into massive kind of blocks
Mm.
and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Very cool. Uh, so let's talk about like you got 40 people who are full time. Full time in my mind,
So 60 full-time developers.
60. Oh,
I believe there's more than 60 full-time staff for Dash Core. That's
okay.
just one of the big groups. So yeah,
Right.
it's a big group.
Sure. So that implies there's some kind of an entity then. If you're a full timer, then that means that is your job, which
Hmm.
require you being paid. Which brings me to my question about the DAO. Dash. I've seen headlines saying Dash was the first functional DAO in existence. Can you explain first of all what is a DAO to anybody that has no idea what we're talking about, and
Yeah.
what how does Dash's DAO work?
So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, meaning it has to be decentralized, as in no one person or group controls it. Yeah, open participation. It has to be autonomous, meaning it doesn't require outside funding to work. It funds itself, right? Runs itself. An organization implies it has to have some mechanism of coming together or acting as a single unit. So if you compare that to something like
Sure.
Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a decentralized network, but it's not autonomous. It's mostly autonomous, I'd say, because miners are paid by the network to run itself. They paid in Bitcoin to run itself. So most of it's autonomous, but nodes are not incentivized and developers are not incentivized. So you still need some outside money to help to make it work. And it's not an organization because there's no way of coming to a consensus on an issue, really. And of course, we've seen that with the years and years of battle over the scaling issue, which finally ended up in a split. But there's no way of
Sure.
just everyone who's controls the Bitcoin network to just come together and just say this is what we majority agree. So
Hmm.
Dash is different because Bitcoin, all the money goes straight to the miners. With
Hmm.
Dash, 90% of the funds get split 50-50, so 45% of the total between miners and masternodes. And so
Hmm.
masternodes being the specialized node that runs special functions, and you have to have 1,000 Dash in order to run a node. And so you get
Sure.
income from that. But if the node goes offline, you get bumped to the back of the payment queue. So they actually incentivize nodes to keep running so that you don't just have a node drop off the network. It actually chokes off the
Sure.
money. So the 10% that's left is this thing called the treasury. And that was made to fund development. I mean, originally Dash had something called the Dash Foundation or Darkcoin Foundation, later called
Hmm.
the Dash Foundation,
Yeah.
trying to do some kind of like a Bitcoin Foundation type thing to fund developers, and that didn't work.
Hmm.
So they scrapped that, and now there's now the 10% of the block reward coming in every month was made to be available for developers. but not exclusively.
Mm.
So the masternodes have to vote on what happens at 10%. Anyone could put in a proposal. There's a 5 dash spam fee, which used to be like $25 or something really small like that. And it's
Yeah,
not quite
now it's a big chunk.
yeah, now it's not that bad, but um, anyone could submit a proposal with a 5 dash spam fee, and then the net masternodes vote on the proposal with a net 10% of votes. So, say if there's 1,000 masternodes, 100 vote yes, none vote no, or 200 vote yes and 100 votes no, however that works out. Then the proposal gets just funded and it gets paid off straight off the blockchain after that. So historically, this has been mostly for developers. I remember 90 to 80% in that range was usually how much went to fund the developers. And over time, like especially after this time, around this time last year, the price took off to such an extent that then before you knew it, you had like 30% taken up by developers, and then some budget cycles, nothing. And entirely other organizations sprung up with that.
Interesting. So you mentioned masternodes and 1,000 masternodes. Do you know how many masternodes there are on Dash's network, or is there a way to know? Is that
last I checked last week, it was 4,760 or so.
Okay.
So probably at least 47,000. That's also there's about 8,000 Dash in existence right now. So it's over half of Dash's supply is being hodled by these nodes.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I I heard somebody talking about like at some point Dash will be 99.9% in masternodes, and there will be one circulating Dash on the network.
Yeah, that might be true. I mean, it depends if there's I have a keen interest in economics, and there's always economic incentives for all kinds of things. And if people need Dash to do something, they'll pay a higher premium to have it. Sure. And then the people on the holding it, some people just say, I have 2 masternodes and I only need 1. I'll just sell this off, buy a yacht or an island or a battleship or whatever, and then just all the rest of it just goes back in the ecosystem.
Sure. So what's the logic behind the low circulating supply? I'm guessing that's potentially why the price, looking at the price a couple months ago when everything was crashing, Dash was like holding strong. Like I was very impressed with how strong Dash was holding. And now the flip side, I mean, everything's still in the tank pretty bad, but Dash has fallen pretty hard. So I'm wondering if that's a product of the circulating supply. Like what's the thought there?
So the thought behind doing that is right now the problem with cryptocurrency is you have a lot of it that's being taken and used for speculation. In fact, I would argue 90% or more is like a lot of it. We're still at a very early stage of the game. And so for Dash, I would say you could say masternodes are paid to hodl. Right, they're paid to keep it off exchanges, off places where it can be speculated on or hacked or stolen. Also, just kept off that, and so whatever's left is there for actual use. And so, one of the biggest problems with cryptocurrency has been its speculative use. Yeah, if you've noticed, with Bitcoin used to be used a lot more for economic purposes, for direct commerce and things like that, and back in 2016 or so, earlier 2016, I believe that around Brexit, it was more stable than the British pound for a while.
Yeah,
just because by virtue of how used it was in everyday transactions. And then Bitcoin has since increased in user base, I would say, increased in value, increased in all this kind of stuff. But then the price is just going all over the place now because it's mostly being speculated on now that it's not as useful for transferring money. Right. So I'm guessing that's the same thing. It's just to try to keep it off market. Of course, what Dash needs to still catch up on is plenty of regular users for commerce. And, it's making some great strides with that. But again, we're still very early in the game.
Yeah. No, I agree. One more question about governance. I know your background was dealing with trolls, and there are people that love to hate Evan. And I think some of that, I think some of it's fair criticism, and I think some of it is probably a misunderstanding of who Evan is as a person. Who, anytime I've seen him speak, he strikes me as someone who's probably too intelligent for most people to understand what the hell he's trying to express. But
That's a fair assessment.
I think that's part of the problem there. But was a lot of controversy about Dash. You touched on it. The pre-mine, the Masternode reward system being criticized as like a centralization, quote unquote scam. People will use that term. What is Dash's official position on, the heavy criticism that come from some of the other communities? My thought is like the competitive coins in the ecosystem. Like, do you guys fight that? Is it like active PR to go against that, or what do you do with that?
Yeah, the core team doesn't. They're too focused on professionalism and actually building something for a change.
Sure.
And obviously, the take on the initial beginnings are, is clearly a bug left over from the Litecoin code, which is one of the reasons why Dash switched from the Litecoin code base pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah.
As far as like the Masternode system, that's a very interesting way of saying it, that the people who are invested the most in the project should not have a say in it, or there's something off with that. And obviously, the idea of Bitcoin scaling debate is very politicized. And one thing is for sure, though, is a very small group of people manage to control its destiny. And one could say two small groups of people. One could say the large mining conglomerates, or one could say the core team. And there's really no way of the rest of the network to openly participate in that. And I know a lot of people are significantly invested in Bitcoin. Like, take the Roger Ver example. Say he has a lot of Bitcoin, and then people with almost none get to change parameters, or not change them when they need to be. They completely ruin the value of his investment, and he's powerless to do anything about it. And that's it's a really sad. I don't think that's an enviable situation. So there's nothing. The opposite is quite clearly a lot better, where you can actually have a group of people who are the most invested. You can prove it, who can just vote using their votes, say once and for all what they believe, or stop funding the core team. Right. And there's been a couple. The Dash core team has been a very trustworthy and competent organization. There have been a couple of their budget proposals that failed, though, that the Masternodes were just like, nah, we don't want no money for that. I mean, how good would that be? Imagine where Bitcoin would be today if its investors could refire and replace the core team. I mean, whether or not you think that's a good thing, that would definitely be a much greater movement. It would not be stagnation. It would definitely just be, there would be no Bitcoin Cash. It would just, that's what it would be, probably.
Yeah,
or
probably.
We can't be, or at least you could say the Bitcoin Cash people would have been outnumbered by votes and just had to accept the consensus.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the Masternode system is pretty genius in that term.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's an interesting perspective. I'm one of the people I get criticized for being a Bitcoin Cash shill, simply because I don't like the management style, the fact that there's 4 people that contribute to Bitcoin's GitHub and that kind of thing. So I've been pro Bitcoin Cash, and I think you're right. I think that's an interesting perspective on the Masternodes. So onto usage, which I think is the most important thing, and I think you've alluded to also is the most important thing. So what is Dash better at than any other coin?
Yeah, so as far as being used as a currency, Dash is better in being cheaper and faster for transfer, cheaper, faster, and more secure, all in the same time than anything else on Earth right now, as far as I know. So one of the big arguments behind Bitcoin, when people say, well, why not use some other altcoin out there that just is better and faster, whatever, people always say that Bitcoin's security, that there's so much hash power, so much going on, so much of a good distribution, that this is something you can really trust. This is rock solid. And so Dash has one of the highest hash rates of the other coins out there, and has a significant community, has a bunch of significant investors who participate in the ecosystem, has all this kind of stuff. So it has that security that you might not just launch, say, an iota or a nano or whatever and just say, oh, they look, they're cheap, they're fast. And then you run into a bunch of bugs, then you run into some reverse transactions or whatever, which
Right.
is no criticism. It's just a sign of it's not quite there yet.
Right.
So Dash's median transaction fee is the lowest of any major cryptocurrency right now. I mean, I
Sure.
usually compare, lower than Ethereum, lower even than Bitcoin Cash. That's a very close competitor always,
Right.
and lower than Litecoin. Uh, Last I checked, you could send 3 Dash transactions for under a penny, so
Crazy.
that's not bad. And also just the instant send functionality that you can instantly confirm a transaction, walk away, and be done. Just
Sure.
one and done. And the other thing is there's this platform coming out. I believe the alpha is coming out later this year, codenamed Evolution.
Mhm.
That its initial, and I mean that's a whole nother debate on a whole nother conversation. All that's going to do, but the initial idea was let's make this user friendly protocol level. So, for
Yeah.
example, you ever use the Edge wallet?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about the Edge wallet is they have a username and password login as opposed to you save your CL. You could still do a seed backup, and it
Right.
just adds a much more secure kind of like easy user friendly way of getting in. However, when you're sending to other people, you still have to copy and paste these long public keys or scan a QR code or something. And one thing, whenever I go to conferences and talk about this sort of thing, I ask some people, "Hey, do you want some Dash?" And they, yeah. Well, okay, what's your address? And then it's like, okay, well, X, lowercase X, Y, 7. It's like, yeah, you just run into problems
Right.
initially, like instantly.
Yeah.
So what Dash was initially set out to do was with his evolution update, replace that with usernames. So you can
Mhm.
just send and receive to usernames. You can friend into a
Interesting.
contacts list and all that stuff. And
Cool.
it's starting to develop into something much more ambitious than that. But once that's
Yeah.
out, there will be you'll be second to none.
Yeah. Very cool. I don't know if you see our meeting timer is telling us we've got like 5 minutes left on the meeting, but I've probably got 25 minutes more questions. So if we get cut off, we'll reconnect because I want to get through a few more things.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's see. So Dash markets itself in two ways. I see a lot of kind of advertising stuff like Dash is this mainstream adoption coin, but it also markets itself as this privacy coin. So does Dash want to compete with Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, or does Dash primarily want to compete against like Zcash and Monero?
Um, the answer to that specific question is none of the above. Dash wants to
Okay,
compete against the central banking system,
sure.
right? Just aiming higher than that, aiming to try to compete against PayPal and Venmo and
Right.
banks and all that kind of stuff. So, as far as the privacy thing, that was the first problem assessed with, or I don't want to say problem, sounds like a criticism, like, screw you, Satoshi made a terrible coin. No, that's absolutely the opposite. But the first improvement the first tightening of the screw that could be done to the basic Bitcoin idea.
Right.
And of course, Dash's privacy has still never been broken to this day and has a significant bug bounty program to look for any kind of bugs or weaknesses in the code base.
Sure.
And the big difference is between that and coins like Zcash or Monero
Hmm.
is the approach, the technical approach, and then, of course, the philosophy behind it.
Right.
Oh, of course, anonymous transactions have the same basic result of anonymous transactions. You send to someone, you can't tell who you sent it to or who you got it from.
Sure.
But the difference is Dash uses a coin join based method that mixes around inputs. And so when you send and receive a transaction, it comes from a bunch of different inputs. And that's done trustlessly through the Masternode network, which
Right.
eliminates the needs of third parties like tumblers and things like that.
Right.
And the big difference is Dash is trying to have its primary value as money, as
Sure.
something valuable. And as such, transparency of the blockchain is a big must. You have to
Sure.
see how much there is. You have to see where it gets sent, or you have to see how much people spend on fees. You have to be able to audit it completely. And the problem with encrypting certain transactions from the public is you can hide some of that valuable data. Like, how do
Sure.
we know how many? How do we know Zcash? How many Zcash coins there are in existence? How do we be absolutely sure? How do
Right.
we make sure that not one person that one person doesn't own 58% of all the Monero in existence. These kinds
Right.
of things you can't really know. And
Right.
so because of that sort of trade-off, Dash isn't trying to obfuscate the movements of its coin supply. It's trying to just remove the part that actually matters, which is
Mhm.
linking users, right? Linking
Right.
transactions from the user and finding out what they mean.
Right. Sure. I think we're getting this 2 minute warning. Maybe we should,
Mm-hmm.
Matt, if you want to maybe kill the live stream, we'll reboot here. So now the ticker teaser headline question is: Dash more private than Monero or Zcash?
Um, this is a difficult thing because it's really hard to quantify, right?
Sure.
Zcash, I don't know quite as well, just because it's a little bit more new kid on the block. The only thing I've heard is the whole trusted setup
Mhm.
idea, where you had to trust a few people to not basically
Right.
have keys unmask everything.
Yeah.
But I don't, since Dash doesn't suffer from that problem. I wouldn't have that, and I would not personally trust Monero's privacy. And of course, people
Mhm.
would say, "Well, of course, you're a Dash show, whatever," which somehow has something to do with Monero in some people's eyes. But the idea is there's been a few different breaches of Monero's privacy over the years. There was a transaction linking and build problem a while back, and most notably, right recently, they discovered a problem with the Monero V fork, which I believe was called off. That if someone did
Yeah.
a chain split like
I
Bitcoin
I think
Cash,
they've rescheduled it, whatever that means.
yeah. But the problem is if you could clone the chain, right? You can split the chain.
Mhm.
If you use the same key image to claim your new coins,
Mhm.
it immediately identifies which of your coins are the real ones on the main chain. So it de-anonymizes you. And if enough people claim their coins that way, enough of the Monero's total
Yep.
blockchain gets de-anonymized, or it makes it much easier to trace.
Sure.
So I would say, to answer that question, I would feel comfortable with saying probably at this point.
Okay.
And part of that is when you get into this stuff, gets way more technical, beyond my pay grade and all that kind of stuff. But I do know that one of the big worries with cryptocurrency and privacy is quantum computing and how that will affect things. And
Right.
as it stands, encrypted privacy coins or basically have like a one-way type of transaction. Like it's just very
Right.
similar to Bitcoin's transactions, except they're simply encrypted out of public view. And the
Mhm.
problem is if you start using quantum computing to de-anonymize that chain, you can de-anonymize the whole chain, retroactively exposing all past transactions, which could cause some problems.
Sure.
Dash's founder Evan said he's called Dash's privacy solution an off-chain privacy solution, meaning that there's nothing really to expose on the blockchain. You just see it all, and it just that making sense of it is the difficult thing. So I don't fully understand
Mhm.
how that would interface with quantum computing, which I don't think anyone honestly does because it's
Yeah.
not
No.
quite at that level yet.
Right.
But it seems like it might be better long term for that. So I would
Sure.
say probably more, but we'll see.
Yeah. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a cryptographer. So I'm always curious. I feel like those are the things that always come up. I feel like everybody compares their coin to Monero if they're a privacy coin, and therefore, it's the question to ask. But I know that's probably the hottest troll topic on Reddit as far as Dash and privacy and everything's concerned. Would
Yeah,
that
of
be a
course.
fair assessment?
Probably it's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where the same people who try to say that Dash isn't private, which I'm yet to find any convincing evidence thereof, are the
Mhm.
same people that have no issue with Bitcoin Cash or Lightning or Litecoin. I mean, on the same
Right.
thing, despite having nothing special trying
Right.
for in that. And I don't take that criticism seriously for that reason.
Sure. No, I think that's totally valid. So back to like the use case stuff. Dash has a lot of advocates. I'm a libertarian activist myself. That's how I got involved in Bitcoin as well. So I see Dash advertised at a number of things. I'm also a mixed martial art. I'm a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach, and I noticed that
Nice.
I've seen some MMA fighters walking out in Dash gear.
Hmm.
So what? How did the vibrant community of Dash kind of come about? Like, why was it chosen to like advertise Dash at festivals and like what? How are those decisions made? Like, where is Dash being marketed and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so to start out with the little idea of community, uh, Dash tends to have a very harmonious community. In other words, there's some arguments here or there about things, but tend to be very. Um, it tends to be the community. People who believe in freedom tend to not like to admit how influenced we are by leaders, and so you have a lot of members of the Bitcoin core team and Blockstream and other groups like that engaging in some sort of hostility
Hmm.
when advocating their way. And the same thing with, for example, Litecoin, Monero, a few others. Then you have things like Ethereum and Dash that have a different approach to things from the top, and it tends to echo through the community.
Hmm.
So you have a very constructive, go out there and build stuff kind of attitude in general,
Right.
and of course, um, that also includes when you have that also sorry totally lost the train of thought there, but that also includes when you have a coin that's not as focused on speculation.
Right.
We have people that actually care about if other people use it, not just do I generate a uh, headline and then profit from it.
Right. Sure.
So that's the first part. The second part is because of this community funding mechanism, now you have the ability to actually sponsor things. And anyone, it's kind of like a crowdsourced thing because anyone can submit a proposal. So someone has an idea, they
Right.
say, "Oh, I got this great idea, I can make stuff happen." They don't need to run it through any individual or groups or particular group of people. They run it by the whole network. The whole
Right.
network can tell them if they think it's a good idea or not. And so because of that, you've had all kinds of different people trying things before the network and seeing how that worked. And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, as far as from the MMA world, first it was Davis dos Santos, who's a
Mm.
fighter. I believe he trained in TriStar Gym, who is received a bunch of voluntary donations from the Brazilian Dash community, and that sort of sparked off that whole idea. And then Bellator welterweight champion Rory MacDonald ended up being
Hmm.
funded, and now Chael Sonnen is funded
Oh,
for his own promotion out in Portland, and so
mm.
look forward to that. I'm also going to be getting on his show at some point, which is going to be interesting.
Very
So
cool. I didn't know Chael. I noticed Rory. You know, I do cryptocurrency advocacy stuff with Crypto Traders Pro full time. But I like every night of the week. I'm at the gym. I'm a Alliance Jiu Jitsu purple belt.
mhm.
I coach. I compete. And so I'm going through my MMA news feed, and I see Rory McDonald go by wearing a Dash hat, and I was like,
Well, what is this?
right? I didn't even catch it at first. I was like, wait, what? Am I in my cryptocurrency feed or am I in my MMA feed? And so I had to go back
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
check it out. So
reports
it's
are that he got more from that sponsorship than the Reebok sponsorship paid all of one UFC's card combined to all
yeah,
the
I
fighters.
believe it. No, Reebok has done nothing but take fighters back a few steps. I'm
Yes.
friends with professional fighters, and
Yeah, there's a picture of me training with Matt Hughes from way back in the day, so I know about that, all about that.
sure,
But anyway, back to the actual subject at hand. You see a lot of people energized from various communities,
yeah,
and is trying to get stuff done. And for example, you see parts of the third world where people, largely the people who have the cryptocurrency or been pioneering it in the first world, kind of have to take an interest in that area of the world in order to throw them some money or throw some
right,
development or do some kind of thing that helps them out there.
sure,
And with Dash, you can just have someone come and say, "Hey, I'm from such and such a country. We have big problems with our currency. So can we get funded to keep doing this stuff?"
mm,
And then if the answer is yes, all of a sudden you have a well-funded, well-oiled organization, which is, as we've seen in Venezuela, the Dash Caracas group
mm,
has made incredible strides, having a bunch of conferences with over a total of like 2,000 to 3,000 people so far.
yeah,
There's over 100 businesses that take Dash now in Venezuela, and it's growing at an exponential rate. So that's just one of those things where you can't have enough time for the core team to just I'll say we're going to focus on this area, or you don't
Sure.
have the community, you don't have enough people in the community to where they get this whole movement going, this momentum, and then try to, do some donations and all this kind of stuff where you can actually have someone in that country say, I'm going to do a proposal and make this work. And then now you have something incredible.
Sure. No, it's very cool. So back to like the Freedom Festival stuff, like, you mentioned Free State Project is what got you to New Hampshire. Does Dash specifically kind of want to affiliate itself to like a libertarian worldview? I noticed Dash also brought Ben Swan back from the ashes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it's like Dash staking its flag with libertarian minded stuff. Is that just a function of people pushing that onto the network, or is that where does that come from?
I think that in order to be associated with cryptocurrency in a way that's not purely profit motivated, you kind of have to be advocating for different approaches to the way the world is today.
Sure.
So a lot of people who aren't the kinds of people, in my experience, the political right and left are mostly not that dissatisfied with the current financial system. Of course, there's always like, corruption, the bankers, and all this kind of stuff. There's a little bit of that under the current, but there isn't the end the Fed attitude of, we want a different money that we control only. We don't think government should be in control of money. We don't think anyone should be in control of money. And so because of that, you have a lot of libertarians that have invested heavily in cryptocurrency, especially in Dash, because, and I find the same to be the case with Bitcoin Cash, that a lot of people, because something that's trying to be used as money, you can have something like Bitcoin as a store of value that's not really a threat to the current financial system as a store of value. You can have something, like Ethereum that's trying to build a bunch of interesting stuff that I believe that kind of stuff can be perhaps the next level of great threat to current power structures, but it's not. It's not the immediate threat. And there's a bunch of other things coming. It's just you have to sort of be into this philosophy in order to, or you have to have bought into the whole concept through more inefficient means. You have to have somehow been, I'm a programmer and I looked at this, I think it's good, or I'm in finance, I deal with the Dash Core Group's current CEO, who used to be the director of finance, Ryan Taylor. He worked in the finance industry for a few decades, I believe, worked for some hedge funds, and then the business development manager for Dash worked for American Express for 17 years. And you have a bunch of people that come from different backgrounds that are much more specialized in relating to that, to where they see, well, this is something that does the thing that I'm really deep in, but it does it better. But for the rest of the general public, you probably need to care about this from liberty perspective. So all that means is you got a bunch of people who are willing to vote for pro-liberty proposals, and then you just need someone to submit a proposal. Like the Crypto Show submitted a proposal. They're really hardcore pro-Ron Paul type people. Free Talk Live submitted a proposal. They got funded. And then I've been sort of doing my part. Of course, Ben Swan did his proposal. And Ben Swan brought, currently going through, which I don't like to speak on too much until it's actually written in stone, if so. But the Free Thought Project has a proposal in right now. We Are Change has a proposal in this cycle.
Cool.
A few others have that. And then I got a proposal passed to fund New Hampshire Liberty Forum, which is already done and it turned out great. And I also passed another one to fund the Porcupine Freedom Festival, or PorcFest, this June. That also got passed. And I'm working on a few others, but again, I'm not going to talk too much about it until it's actually written in the blockchain.
For sure. Well, it's exciting. That's very cool. I think it's a very cool mechanism, especially, if you believe in, perfect democracy, that kind of thing. I think that's very cool. So bigger picture stuff. Is Dash competing to be the number one coin in the world? Does the world need to function on the Dash financial standard, full decentralized on Dash? Or is it more like Litecoin, Dash is cool being just some facet of the crypto ecosystem, and, use Dash if you want, use something else if you want, whatever?
Yeah, the answer is kind of a little bit in between the two. Definitely Dash is gearing to be number one in what it does. And so Dash wants to be the best payments system and currency in the world.
Mhm.
So there's not that much room for serious competitors. But of course, you could say the U.S. dollar is the best fiat currency out there. You know,
Right.
what a competition. But then
Sure.
there's still others. There's still pesos. There's still euros and pounds. There's still others out there.
Right.
Uh, but at the same time, the crypto universe is very big right
Yeah.
now. It's not just about a money or store of value or some extra coins that do some extra things. There's all kinds of smart contract type stuff. There's all kinds of other functionalities out there. There's
Sure.
Tangle based cryptocurrencies now. There's
Right.
just all kinds of different things. There's something like Ripple that was never meant to be a decentralized peer-to-peer electronic cash system, but rather a rail for transacting between financial institutions. There's a bunch of extra stuff that will probably be out there for a while. Although Dash is definitely stepping up its game. The Evolution platform that was originally meant to just be like the usernames now is turning into an entirely DApp platform, similar to supposedly going to be some people. The hype way of saying that is Ethereum killer, but trying to do different things in Ethereum, where Ethereum's trying to do everything on the blockchain, whereas Dash is trying to have the to use this thing called the Dash drive to store just the indexes of all kinds of dApps, but still have a DApp be a DApp platform.
Interesting.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in crypto space. I think that Dash can definitely be number one someday. I don't know. That, of course, depends on what else pops up for whatever other reasons. I mean, I tend to think that whatever becomes the world's money will become the world's number one thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
And like why banks are incredibly rich as opposed to other companies. But then you have other things like social networks and data companies and just other industries that might be more powerful, more influential. So it's really up in the air. But top five, definitely. If not like top three, I would say.
Sure. Very cool. So one of the thoughts that comes out, like you got the altcoin people, of which, Dash is certainly an altcoin community, a vibrant one. But then you got your Bitcoin maximalists that say that, well, every good idea that comes out of the altcoin community is just ultimately going to get absorbed by Bitcoin Core, and Bitcoin's going to adopt the great ideas, get rid of the bad ones, and Bitcoin's always going to win. What's your thought on that mentality? And then furthermore, what's your opinion on Bitcoin in general?
Oh, well, my thought on that mentality is it's based on just about zero fact. I mean, I'm extremely critical of that mentality just because of reality. How it's been, 5 years almost since Dash's founder first came and said, "You got a privacy problem, fix it." Nothing's happened.
Right.
Can't scale beyond 400,000 transactions a day at its upper limit. Or just won't scale, or just hasn't done that. No governance problem. There's all these problems that Bitcoin has had, and in no way is that a criticism of what it was. But this is hear all the hype. Everyone still talks about the hype about Bitcoin's going to crush the financial system. It's going to do this. It's going to upset governments. It's going to do all this kind of stuff. And still, we're almost 10 years into the game. That's a long time. It doesn't mean it hasn't done. Oop. Yep, you seem to have lost your video, but it does have a picture that there we go. Yeah, so it's been almost 10 years. That's an eternity in the tech world, and of course, in time things happen faster. Bitcoin's done a lot of great things, but I feel like if it was this sort of Borg-like thing that just absorbs more elements all the time, grows stronger by the day, I think it would have happened by now.
Sure.
And so my general thought on Bitcoin was one thing is interesting when I see all these different technologies trying out new things. And I remember when Ethereum came on the scene and then proceeded to, more or less break every few months in some kind of way, which is not a criticism towards Ethereum at all. Of course, they've made a lot of progress. Then you get IOTA breaking every few days or whatever it is.
Right.
Bitcoin never really broke. You could say that now it can't handle the users at its current iteration. But Bitcoin was just everything that Bitcoin figured out, the whole mining system, proof of work, just the basic integrity of the blockchain, just all every good idea has been built on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's
Mhm.
like the pre-alpha almost,
Sure.
yet somehow is still around and being used almost a decade later. I mean, that's a pretty amazing achievement if you ask me. I don't,
Yeah.
for all the, oh well, you could improve its privacy, or you could make it scale better, or you could add usernames, make it less clunky to use. For all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, it's kind of like I mean, how long have we been using manual transmission vehicles
Sure.
until like Tesla and other electric cars are coming, finally starting to become like really good and superior?
Right.
Like it's kind of like the manual transmission. That when did this? How many hundreds of years has this thing been around? I mean, I don't know how long. I
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah.
dated it.
Probably
It's
a
got to
hundred
be
at
over a
least.
hundred.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's still a cool thing to do. It's not even just retro, like if you're some hipster with a big beard and a waxed mustache who's still doing something, still churning your own butter like that. It's not one of those kinds of things. It's actually still viable to use today
Right.
instead of something else. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. I just think it's time to start when this kind of technology hits the general market. It's
Mhm.
time to build on it to make the most finessed and perfect financial system that we possibly can.
Yeah. Absolutely. So then, what does absolute success look like for Dash? Like, when do you guys bust out the champagne and say, we've done it, we've won? Like this is the greatest thing that could have possibly happened. What does that headline look like?
Yeah, so right now, while I'm walking around downtown Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is right by where I live, about 20,000 people live there, and there's about 25 or so Dash accepting businesses in the little like half mile downtown thing. Just go here, buy everything.
Cool.
Probably like something like double that or around that amount in every single town across the world, every major city,
Sure.
that to where you can just fly somewhere and then you don't have to struggle to spend it.
Right.
You can just say, oh, I'm going to see, I'm in Vienna now. Where can I spend this stuff? And there's like, 5, 10 restaurants that take it. There's like
Right.
you can pay for your housing, you can pay for your rent, all this kind of stuff. That's kind of what ultimate success looks like. Of course, if you go way beyond that, you can say ultimate success is every single human on the planet using Dash for their transactions, which is also a possibility. But I'd like to say something that I can kind of see from what I'm
Mhm.
seeing happening in just a few years.
Sure. Absolutely. Getting close to wrapping up here. What is the biggest misconception? If you could change everyone's mind about one thing about Dash, what would that be?
Hmm. I would say the biggest misconception is a lack of conception. Is just
Okay.
not knowing what is this, how is it different, whatever. Not knowing how the governance system works, not
Mhm.
knowing that it's fast and cheap and has so many big members. Um, I'd have to do a two-way tie between all the publications you see, and like I used to write for Cointelegraph back in the day, and
Mhm.
even now you see articles there that just they call it just privacy focused altcoin. That's like the one trick pony, and that's like 3 years outdated at least. Like
Sure.
just so that's one. It have to be a tie between that or the misconception that it's just another, for lack of a better word, another shit coin, just another one of these
Right.
things with like a few fans that you don't see massive. Like there's hundreds of people who are working either full or part time for Dash. Like
Mhm.
for Dash core team, it's 60, 70, 80, somewhere in that range if you count all part timers. But
Right.
there's at least double or triple that right now who are just working for Dash, either part time or full time. And that's
Yeah.
a massive ecosystem, and people just don't know how big Dash is. They don't
Right.
know that I have this site that I help run called discoverdash.com, and currently lists about 780 or coming really close to 800 businesses around the world that take Dash, and
Cool.
we're just adding more all the time. And I'm sure there's well over 1,000 businesses around the world right now that take Dash,
Mhm.
and we just have to find the rest. So that's the
Right.
biggest. I would say that's the biggest misconception. The privacy wouldn't be number two, but the biggest
Sure.
one is that this isn't everywhere.
Right. Very cool. Real quick, Bitcoin BTC or Bitcoin Cash? What do you like better?
Definitely Bitcoin Cash. I think it's like it's like Dash's cousin. It's very similar, the same philosophy at least. It does
Yeah.
the same thing. What does Bitcoin Core do today? I don't know.
It sits in the mempool, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. All right, cool. Anything we missed? Anybody that deserves a shout out before we close it down?
Yeah, so if you want to know more about Dash, I'll wait for the site dashforcenews.com. It's the number one source for Dash news. It's a good time. And if you want to look into how Dash is being used in the everyday life, or if you have some Dash hanging around and want to go spend it somewhere, go to discoverdash.com. And those two places should keep you pretty satisfied. You just kind of keep one eye on both of those. You won't be caught surprised when it's like you just start looking at seeing all these Dash accepted here stickers in the storefront windows of your town. You're like, how did this happen? You will know how it happened.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Joel. I really appreciate you taking this time. I think we may have gone a little over an hour. So,
fine.
Yeah, it was a good one. But as always, I appreciate you making the time, answering questions, going over some of the, maybe the controversial stuff. And, just in short, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Yeah, for sure. So, everybody, this has been the 6th episode of CoinCast on Crypto Traders Group on Facebook. It'll be broadcast on YouTube, and you can always find us at cryptotraderspro.com to learn to trade. You can learn to trade Dash. So, thanks again, everybody. See you next time.
Have a good evening.